G'day guys, how are you and welcome back to another video. In today's video I'm going to show you how you can get a simple but effective serial activation window or prompt in your application. So let's begin. So basically what I mean is every time you install an application, 9 times out of 10 if it's a paid for product, it's going to ask you for a serial key. So I'm going to show you how to do that. Now I have seen other people do this tutorial on YouTube, and I just kind of think that the way they've done it is not usually the best way to go about it. For example, they're just doing simple if statements. If the text box is equal this, then it's activated, and then they're just saving a setting within a public boolean within the properties.settings resources or whatnot, and anybody could just go in there and change that into tell it that it is activated, skipping that activation window or activation step. And also what they could do is, because it is just in plain text, that serial key, they could just simply drag that across or that exe into a notepad, and then they can get the serial key that way. So in today's video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it so it actually checks the database for that serial key, and if it hasn't been activated, then it's going to activate it. If it has been activated, then it's going to say your product has already been activated. And then what I'm also going to do is I'm going to do something with the isolated storage, where what that will do is we're just going to save that key into our isolated storage. And so each time that program turns on, it is going to check to see if that product is activated or if it's been deactivated for some unknown reason. And so by saving that key into our isolated storage, we check if it's activated, which means that the end user doesn't have to put in the serial key each time. So let's begin. So what I've done quickly is I've just created 5 text boxes here and just a button. There's the code behind it. There's nothing there. This is pretty much the norm of what you'd get. What I'm going to do just to start the video off is we'll just go to our SQL Server Management Studio. We're going to create a new database. So I'm just going to call this My Application Database. Now, if you were creating an actual program, let's say for instance school management software that everyone seems to do on YouTube, this would be a program, and then you'd go, your program's database, you then go on the tables. You'd have your student table, your teachers table, and for this one, this is actually going to be an activation table. So just let me quickly set this up. Now, if you're not 100% sure on what I'm doing, do check out my other videos. I've got a few different tutorials on how to set up an SQL database and table and all the rest of it. So just follow along. If you're not really sure what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, do check those videos out, and you'll have more understanding of how to do this. So the first one's our primary key. We want this to obviously increment by 1. So just go yes, that way it will count for us and stay in order. We've got our serial key, which is just going to be the plain text. Now I would recommend that you obviously salt this, but just to make the video a bit quicker, I'm just going to give you guys the core sort of basic understanding of how this works. We're going to create one that's called activated, and this is going to be a bit, so it's either going to be true or false. Okay, so it's activated will be 1, and if it's not activated it'll be 0, representing true or false. So let's save that as an activation table, just like that. And so now when I refresh the database, the activation table is right there. Beautiful. So if I now go to edit the top 200, the serial key ABC, 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 that will be ABC 5 times I believe, and 0 will be false, so the software is not activated. Okay, so that's that one there. Beautiful. Now what I'm going to do is going to go over to our program, and I'm going to go to project. I'm going to add a class, and this class will be our activation class. So I'll just call it activation, and this will be .cs. So here's our activation class, and because we're using a SQL server, we need to import the library, the SQL client library, and so we can begin. So the very first thing we need to do within the activation is we need to actually have the connection string to our server to make sure that we are able to connect. So we go private static string. I can probably do a const string because technically that string should never change. This will be our connection string. So we can put it within there. So the server will equal your computer's name. So go back into your SQL server, and like I said, I've explained all this before in other videos, and I've got another video which is more in depth about why and how it works. So if you're not 100% sure, do check that video out. I believe you will get a bit out of it if you are doing this for the first time. So obviously I'm going to keep talking what I'm doing, but so I need to get the server's name, which is this computer here. If you were to do it with an IP address, then you would put the IP address in there. The database equals my application database. I think I did it like that. I'm going to do this with a user ID. So this is a custom user that I've created within the database for each of them. So user ID and the password equals 1A2B2C. Cool. So there's our connection string to our database. Very nice indeed. Now what we need to do is we're just going to create another public boolean, private boolean to see if the software, well, this is going to represent that if it's activated or not, basically. Beautiful. Alright, so the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a private static void, and this is going to basically update the database. So back in our SQL Server where we had false, we're going to change this to true, where the serial key is equal to that. So whenever the user puts in, if it detects that serial key, then it's going to change the activated to true. However, if it's already been activated, then it's going to simply say, hey, it's already been activated. So let's begin. So I'm going to go private static void. I'm just going to call that update activation. And so we're going to be using our SQL connection, SQL con equals new SQL connection. We're going to put in our connection string, which we already declared before. String. So this will be our query. Update query. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Query equals, and so it's just update activation table set activated equals 1. So remember, 1 is true and 0 is false, where serial key equals at key. So I'm using parameters, so serial key and activated. Yep, that's right. So I'm using parameters. This basically helps. Well, yeah, it helps with SQL injection. So if you're not 100% sure what SQL injection is, just do a quick Google search and you'll see what I mean. So I'm going to put the update query, SQL con, and then the parameters, which will be that key. So we're going to put here the key, which is the parameter which we want to put in the key that we pass through when we go to the update activation right there. And so once that's done, we need to open the connection and then we execute the command. Okay. And then once we've done that, we could just get a simple message box to show, and I need to import that one, and we could just say your software has been activated. Okay, that's pretty much it. So that's going to update the database to say that the software is now activated. But now we need to check to see if the software has already been activated, and if it hasn't, then obviously we need to then do another void which will activate the software itself. So I'm going to create another public static void. I'm going to call it activate software, and just within here we'll just do the key again, which will be the activation key, and we need to then check to see if the software has not already been activated. So this will be another public static bool, and I'll just write here is activated, and this will be another key. So let's do the is activated part. Okay, so this is quite important. We need this to see that if the software is already activated or not. So using SQL connection, SQL con, okay, and so we'll just do another string check for activation query. Probably not the best name, but it will do the job. So we'll just write select activated from activation table, where serial key equals at key, just like that. And then we use the SQL command. So it's just exactly the same as what we did before, pretty much. Okay, except this is going to do a result, so we need to first open the connection, of course. And just write here int results equals, we need to convert it to an integer because it is a boolean technically. And so we execute this guy here, and then we'll just write here if result is higher than 0, which means that then it is activated, because remember 0 is false and 1 is true, so then we return true. However, if it is lower than 1, therefore 0, we return false, meaning that the software is not activated and the end user is required to activate that software. Great, so now we just got one more to do and we're done. We can now, with a twist, we can say if not is activated, which means that it's going to check to see if it's not activated, and we put in the key. So if not activated, which is that method that we've just created up here, which will check to see if it's activated or if it isn't activated. So if it's not activated, then we're going to be using our SQL again to go to the database, so SQL.com, and we'll just simply say string check for key, I guess, query. So this is going to check to see if the key is in that within the table, and we'll just write select count. It should only be there once anyways, but we'll just do a count. So select count from activation table where serial key equals at key. Okay, so there's our query, and then we'll use our command. And so we do our check for that, put an SQL.con, and then once again we're doing parameters to stop SQL injection. And so we'll just write here at key, which is our parameter that we've created, and we're going to check for the key right there. And let's go int results. Okay. Oops. Cool. So then, if the result is higher than 0, meaning that it has indeed found the key, and remember, if it's not activated, then it's only going to go within this part of the code here. If it is activated, then we can simply say that, hey, your software has already been activated. Okay, and this can stop people from doing it on more than one computer. Now you could create another part in the table within the SQL that you could say, if this license was for 3 computers, then you could have a counter, it's on 1 computer, 2 computers, 3 computers. You could have that sort of counting upwards, and then if it tries to go on the 4th computer, then the software could say, well, hey, this is already on too many computers. So if that's done, then we want to activate or update the activation, which will then be the key. And then, yeah, we could pretty much say after this, activated, which is the boolean we created at the top, activated is true. And else, if it can't find that key, and it also hasn't been activated because that key obviously might be incorrect, we could just get a simple message box to show for the end user, and we just write here, your key was incorrect. Okay, you could name it something better than that, and we'll just tell the activation is false. Okay, now, so if the software is activated, say else, your software is already activated. And then just for the fun of it, we could just say activated equals true. Okay, beautiful. So that should, I think, just about do it. Obviously we could do a few more things there to sort of help it along, but let's get to the main part now. So now that we've created that class, which will help us activate it, I just hope that the connection strings is the right one. Let's go back to our form 1. So when we double click on button 1, it'll generate this click event here. And now we need to basically, we want to get each of those, each of the text that's going to be in these text boxes, we need to then merge them together and then we'll send that to our activation. So to do that, we're going to be using string builder. So let's write here string builder SB equals new string builder, and then let's write here for each control C in this dot controls, so this will pretty much just get all the controls that are on the form. So for each of those controls, if C, which is representing our control, is text box. So if any of those controls that we're sort of looping through, if it happens to be a text box, we're going to write string.append, so string builder. If you're not too sure about it, do check out, it's quite a cool tool to use. We're going to append each of the texts from the text box into the string builder, and so then once we've done that, we can then go to our activation, which is a class we've created before, and now here are the voids that we've made public. We can then tell it to activate the software, and now it's asking for the key, and so we can use a string builder's key. Okay, just like that. So let's quickly start the program and see what we get. So if I was to click on the button now, just to test it, what have we got? Alright, so this is saying that it requires an open connection. My mistake, I haven't put SQL on not open. So let's just press that button. Look at that, straight away, your key was incorrect because we don't have anything in the database, which is nothing. So let's go ABC, 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 ABC. Look at that, your software has been activated. Beautiful. If I click on it again, your software is already activated. So now if I go back into my database and let's create a quick query, just right here, select anything from activation table, we can now see that the activation has changed to 1, meaning true, and the software has indeed been activated. So like I said before, you could have, you know, if this license was for 3 computers, then you could have like another table, another column, which represents the amount of computers that the software's been activated on. And if it, you know, is higher than 3, then it's been activated on too many times, you know, and so forth and so forth. So this is great. We can see now that it's working. But if I was to close out the program and then start it back up, you can see that this pops straight back up, okay, which is kind of annoying. So then if I put the key in again, we can see that your software has already been activated. So that's working, but it's kind of annoying that this window is popping up again. You don't really want this activation sort of form popping up, and I think this is where a lot of people get a bit confused and have a hard time sort of making a workaround for this, because a lot of people just go into a public setting where, you know, if they were clever enough, they can, you know, easily manipulate that and change that within the manifest. So I like to do something which is called isolated storage. I first started using isolated storage back with Windows Phone. It was the only real way to sort of be able to save something, and yeah, using isolated storage is quite cool. It doesn't really put it in plain sight. All I'm going to be doing anyways is saving out the key. I'm not going to be telling it that it's activated, because I'm going to tell it to check if it's activated on load. So let's begin. So what I'm going to do is going to go back into our activation class, which is where I am now. And we're simply just going to give it another set of rules to do when we've activated the software. So when we go to this part here, update activation, we can now use our isolated storage. Now I'm going to have to import some stuff, storage file, I think that's it. Yep, so isolated storage file, so it should import the ISO, yep, beautiful. And also isolated storage file equals isolated storage file dot get store, and then from there we want to use the dot user, so the scope or the assembly, and then we'll go null and null, and then from there, so what we're basically doing is we're going to use the stream writer in a second, but we need to first stream the isolated storage file in order to do it with the stream writer. So we'll just write once again using isolated storage stream writer, isolated storage file stream equals new isolated storage file stream. We could just call it settings. So this is what the text file's name is going to be, the file that you're going to create, the path. So if it doesn't exist, then it's going to create one, which is what we're going to tell it to do right here within the mode. We're going to tell it to create new And then now it's asking for the ISO file, which is what we've done up here. So we'll just go to isolated storage file. Beautiful. And so now that we've done that, we can now use our stream writer. Oops, I haven't imported that. That's all right. Stream writer, SW. And so the stream is coming from the isolated storage file stream. I think I spelled that wrong. Yes, I have. Okay, so it's coming from the stream. And then we can just simply say SW.WriteLine. We could write the key in there. So we're not exactly telling it that the software has already been activated, but we're just simply going to write the key. Now you might say, well, that's a bit, it's a bit of a security flaw there because, the user's key is going to be right there in plain sight. But the user should already technically know what their product key is. And who's to stop someone else from using, something like Jelly Bean or tool or product key finder tool or something like that from getting that key. So that'll write the key to that isolated storage file, which is going to be called setting, which will be stored somewhere on the computer. You can obviously get the location of it within the app data and isolated storage and some random file name and folder name and stuff. So that's that part there. But that's all fine and dandy writing it to the file, but we need to now be able to access it. So if we go back to our form1.cs, type in this.loaded, which will be the load event for the application. So whenever it loads up, this will be the form1 load. We're going to check to see if that file's there. And if it is there, then we're going to read the key and check if it's activated. So I'm going to go using isolated storage file. Equals isolated storage file. We're going to get the store. We're going to use, of course, the user, just like before, or the assembly, wherever it can find it. It's basically kind of like what we did before, just we're going to be using the writer. However, on the load, the user may not have already activated the software. So if we try and access a file which hasn't been created, because remember, it's only been created after we activate the software. But if we're trying to access a file that hasn't been created because we haven't accessed the file yet, activated it, therefore writing it, it's going to crash. It's going to say, well, hey, there's no file there. I don't know what you're on about because there's nothing there. So we're going to do a try event. So we're going to try and pretty much do this task. So we're going to try and go isolated storage file stream, isolated storage file stream, and we just call it settings.txt. So right now it's going to try and access that settings. Did I call it settings or settings? So it's going to try and access that file, so settings.txt, and it's asking us, what exactly do you want to do with it? Well, preferably we'd like to open it. So we just want to open that file, and then so once that's happened, it's asking the path, which is what we've done before at the top using, so very similar to what we've done the first time. So now we've done that, what we're going to do is we're just going to type in using system IO stream reader SW equals new system stream reader. Where's the stream coming from? It's coming from our isolated streams file, which is right there. And then once we've done that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a boolean called activated, and that activated boolean is going to equal our activation dot is activated, and now we need to put the key in there. So we're going to check to see if it's activated. So let's write sr.readLine because there's only going to be one line, so it only needs to read the one. So it's going to check to see if it's activated when the program first starts up. And then we can simply say not activated. Then you can tell it to go to activation forum. However, if it is activated, we could just say go to main program. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a message box here just to make sure that it is indeed working. So we've just got message box.show activated, go, sorry, not activated, go to activation form, and then here, go to main form. So this is the main form is where they go if they've paid for the program, and the program's saying that, yeah, it indeed works. As for the catch, well, there is no catch. There's always a catch. But no, in this case, we don't want to do anything. We just want to simply continue off the program. Because remember, we're only doing this here, this TriCast, if this settings file cannot be found. So if I was to start the program, right now, because I haven't actually written the software in the database, it now doesn't believe that, well, it doesn't know that it has to look for that file. And even if it did, it wouldn't be able to find it because that file is not technically there. So let's go back into our SQL database and let's change this to false. And so when I execute the query, you can see that's false, which means that the software then needs to be activated. So let's start her up, ABC, press the button, your software has been activated. Beautiful. If I click it again, your software is already activated. Great. So now technically that file should have been written to the settings. Okay, so if I start the application, go to main form, which means that if not activated, go to activation form, but if it is activated, it goes to the main form, and that's what it's doing there. So yeah, I believe that's one way to get around it. Obviously that's going to pop up because I haven't got another form, but yeah, there you go guys. There's a quick video, well hopefully a quick video on how I believe this would be a better method to getting an activation or serial product key window within your .NET program. Obviously, like I said, even the giants, people can, you know, crack their software, but if it's a little bit harder for them to do, I believe this is a good method. So if you've got any questions, leave them in the comments below, and subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.